The stagecoach rattled into Las Animas, Colorado territory, on a blistering June afternoon in 1877, carrying a passenger who would change everything for one solitary rancher, though neither of them knew it yet. Theresa Grayson pressed her gloved hand against the dusty window, watching the modest frontier town materialize through the shimmering heat. Her traveling dress, once a respectable dove gray, now bore the dust of 3 weeks' hard travel from Philadelphia. But the external dirt was nothing compared to the stain she felt on her soul, the one that had driven her across a continent to answer an advertisement she had found in a discarded newspaper. A mail-order bride arrangement with a Colorado rancher named Lucas Tanner. It had seemed like Providence at the time, an escape route when all other doors had slammed shut. Now, as the stage rolled to a stop outside the depot, terror seized her throat. What if he had heard? What if someone had written him? Philadelphia society had certainly made enough noise about her disgrace. The driver opened the door, and Theresa stepped down on shaking legs. The high altitude made her lightheaded, or perhaps it was fear. She smoothed her skirts and looked around the dusty Main Street. Las Animas was smaller than she had imagined, a collection of wooden buildings clustered along the Arkansas River Valley, surrounded by endless prairie that rolled toward distant mountains. The air smelled of horses, dust, and something cooking that made her empty stomach clench. "Miss Grayson." A male voice, deep and careful, came from behind her. Theresa turned and felt her breath catch. The man standing there was tall, perhaps 30 years old, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of winter pine. He held his hat in his hands, revealing sandy brown hair that needed cutting. His clothes were clean but worn, the shirt rolled to his elbows showing forearms roped with muscle. But it was his face that struck her kind but weathered, with lines around his eyes that spoke of years squinting into the sun and wind. "Yes," she managed. "Mr. Tanner." "Lucas," he said, and something in his voice reminded her of honey slow and warm. "Just Lucas, if you would not mind, and I will call you Theresa if that suits you." He paused, studying her with those steady eyes. "You look tired. Was the journey very hard?" The gentleness in his question nearly undid her. She had steeled herself for coldness, for judgment, for the same disdain that had followed her from Philadelphia. Instead, she found concern. "It was long," she admitted, "but I am well enough." Lucas nodded and gestured toward a wagon hitched nearby. "I have the wagon here. My ranch is about an hour outside town. I thought we might get you settled before we talk about, well, arrangements." He colored slightly. "The preacher is available whenever you feel ready. Or if you have changed your mind, there is a boarding house in town where you could stay while you decide." Theresa stared at him. He was giving her an out. After she had traveled 2,000 miles, after he had presumably paid for her passage, he was offering her a choice. It was so unexpected that tears stung her eyes. "I have not changed my mind," she said quietly, "but there is something I must tell you before we go any further." Lucas waited, his expression patient. "I wrote to you under somewhat false pretenses," Theresa began, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to steady it. "I told you I was unmarried, which is technically true, but I did not tell you everything." She forced herself to meet his eyes, though it felt like pressing against broken glass. "I was engaged to a man from a very prominent Philadelphia family. The wedding was planned, the invitation sent. And then, 3 months ago, his brother came to me with accusations." Lucas remained silent, but he did not turn away. "He said I had been seen in compromising circumstances with another man. He said there were witnesses. It was not true." Her voice broke. "But the man he accused me of being with was my cousin, who had come to me in distress about debts he owed. We met in a tea house in public, but apparently someone saw us and drew their own conclusions. Or perhaps they simply wanted to believe the worst. My fiancé believed his brother over me. He called off the engagement in a very public manner. My reputation was destroyed. The whispers followed me everywhere. My own father suggested I take a position as a governess out west, far from Philadelphia, where no one knew me. She drew a shaking breath. I could not bear the thought of living in shame for something I did not do. When I saw your advertisement, I thought perhaps starting completely fresh, as someone's wife rather than a disgraced woman, might give me back some dignity. But you deserve to know the truth. If you want to withdraw your offer, I will understand. The silence stretched between them. A tumbleweed danced down the empty street. Somewhere a dog barked. Then Lucas put his hat back on and picked up her trunk as if it weighed nothing. "Shame has no home here, only pride does," he said firmly. "If you say you did nothing wrong, that is enough for me." Philadelphia society and their gossip has no place in Las Animas, Colorado territory. Out here, we judge people by what we see them do, not by what others say about them. Theresa felt something crack open inside her chest, the tight, painful thing she had been carrying since that terrible day when her world fell apart. "You believe me?" Just like that. Lucas set the trunk in the wagon bed and turned to her. "I was raised by a woman who was judged unfairly her whole life. My mother was Mexican, and my father married her against his family's wishes. She endured years of whispers and cruelty from people who thought themselves better. But she was the finest woman I have ever known, kind, strong, honest. She taught me that reputation is just what other people say. Character is what you do when no one is watching. I will take character over reputation any day." He offered his hand to help her into the wagon. "So if you are willing to take a chance on a lonely rancher with more cattle than conversation skills, I would be honored to have you as my wife. We can stand before Reverend Miller tomorrow if you are agreeable, and I give you my word that no one will speak of Philadelphia or shame on my ranch. We will build something new together." Theresa took his hand. His palm was calloused and warm, and his grip was steady as he helped her up onto the wagon seat. As she settled onto the rough wood, she felt something she had not felt in months' hope. The ride out to the ranch took them through rolling prairie that seemed to stretch forever under the vast blue sky. Lucas pointed out landmarks as they went. The bend in the Arkansas River where he sometimes fished, the line of cottonwoods that marked the boundary of his land, the distant peaks of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains that caught the afternoon light like purple shadows. He talked in his slow, careful way, giving her time to absorb both the landscape and the momentousness of what she was doing. "The ranch is not large by some standards," he said as they bounced along the rutted track. "I have about 300 head of cattle plus horses. There is a main house that my father built 20 years ago. It is solid and weatherproof, but I will not lie to you, it is not fancy. My mother made it comfortable, but since she passed 2 years ago, I have not had much time for niceties. I have been focused on keeping the ranch going." "Do you have any help?" Theresa asked. "I have 2 hired men who live in the bunkhouse. Manuel has been with me for 5 years, he is good with the horses. And Dusty, an older fellow who is mostly retired but helps with odd jobs in exchange for room and board. They are decent men. They will treat you with respect." The ranch appeared as they crested a low rise, and Theresa caught her breath. It was beautiful in an austere way, a simple wooden house with a wide porch, a barn and several outbuildings, corrals where horses moved like liquid shadows, and beyond it all, the endless sky. The house faced east, and she could imagine watching the sunrise from that porch. Lucas helped her down from the wagon, and as her feet touched the hard, packed earth of the ranch yard, Theresa felt something shift inside her. This was hers now, or it could be. A new life in a place where no one knew about Philadelphia scandals or broken engagements. "Let me show you inside," Lucas said, carrying her trunk toward the house. The interior was dim after the bright sunlight, and it took a moment for Theresa's eyes to adjust. The main room was large, with a stone fireplace at one end and a kitchen area at the other. The furniture was handmade but solid: a table with 6 chairs, a settee near the fireplace, shelves holding books and various necessities. Everything was clean but Spartan, clearly the domain of a man who spent more time outdoors than in. "There are 3 rooms off the main area," Lucas said, setting her trunk down. "The largest is, well, it was my parents' room. I have been sleeping there. There is a smaller room that was mine growing up, and a third that my mother used for sewing and such. I thought you might want to settle into the main bedroom, and I will take my old room until after we are married. I want you to feel comfortable here." Theresa looked at him, this gentle man who kept surprising her. "Thank you, Lucas. That is very considerate." He ducked his head, looking pleased but embarrassed. "I will bring your trunk to the bedroom. There is a well out back with fresh water, and the necessary is behind the house, built solid and as pleasant as such a thing can be. I will let you rest and freshen up. We usually eat around sundown." Nothing fancy tonight, but filling. After he left her alone in the bedroom, Theresa sat on the edge of the bed and looked around. The room was simply furnished: a large bed with a frame Lucas's father must have built, a dresser with a mirror, a washstand, and a trunk at the foot of the bed. But the window looked out over the prairie, and in the fading light she could see the mountains in the distance, their peaks touched with gold. She opened her trunk and pulled out fresh clothes, then found the well Lucas had mentioned. The water was cold and sweet, and washing away the travel dust felt like washing away the last remnants of her old life. When she returned to the house, she found Lucas in the kitchen area, tending to a pot on the stove. "Just stew," he said apologetically. "I am afraid my cooking is basic. My mother tried to teach me, but I never had her touch." "I can cook," Theresa offered. "My mother insisted I learn, despite having servants. She said a woman should know how to take care of a household properly." Lucas smiled, and it transformed his serious face. "Then I suspect we will eat better than I have in 2 years. But tonight you are my guest. Sit and rest." They ate at the table as the light faded outside. The stew was indeed basic, but hearty and hot. Lucas asked her careful questions about her journey, avoiding anything about Philadelphia or what had driven her west. He told her more about the ranch, the rhythms of the seasons, the challenges of raising cattle in this high, dry country. "We are at about 4,000 feet here," he explained. "Winters can be harsh. We get snow that sometimes drifts higher than the barn doors, but the cattle are hardy and we have good shelter. Springs are unpredictable: sometimes we get flooding from snowmelt, other times drought. Summer is the best time, though it gets hot. Fall is beautiful, when the cottonwoods turn gold." After they ate, Lucas insisted on cleaning up while Theresa sat on the porch and watched the stars emerge. She had never seen so many stars, a river of light across the black sky. The air grew cool quickly after sunset, and she wrapped her shawl around her shoulders. Lucas joined her, settling into the other chair with a sigh. "Long day," he said. "Yes," Theresa agreed. Then, feeling brave, she asked, "Lucas, may I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why did you advertise for a mail-order bride? You seem like a good man with a solid ranch. Surely there are women in Las Animas who would have been interested." Lucas was quiet for a long moment. "There are not many unmarried women out here," he said finally. "And the few there are tend to prefer men who live in town, who have businesses or work in the bank or general store. Ranching is hard, lonely work. And if I am honest, I am not good with the kind of courtship that seems to be expected. All that dancing and socializing, trying to say clever things. I am better with cattle and horses than people. He turned to look at her in the starlight. But I am also lonely. This house feels too empty. I want a family, children someday. I want someone to share this life with, to build something with. It seemed like advertising for a bride was more honest than pretending to be something I am not at church socials. I appreciate honesty, Theresa said softly. I have had quite enough of pretense and games. Then we should deal honestly with each other, Lucas said. What are you hoping for from this marriage, Theresa? Beyond escaping Philadelphia, I mean. It was a fair question, and she considered it carefully. I want a real home, she said finally. Not just a house, but a place where I belong. Where I am valued for who I am, not for my family connections or social position. I want to work hard and build something worthwhile. And yes, someday I would like children. I want to create a family built on truth and kindness, not on appearances and social climbing. I think we might do well together then, Lucas said quietly. That night, lying in the large bed alone, Theresa listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch horses moving in the corrals, the distant call of a coyote, the wind against the house. Despite all the upheaval and uncertainty, she felt a strange peace settling over her. Tomorrow she would marry a man she had just met, but somehow it felt less frightening than trying to navigate the cruel waters of Philadelphia society. Morning came early on the ranch. Theresa woke to the sound of Lucas moving around in the main room, and by the time she dressed and emerged, he had coffee made and was frying bacon. "Good morning," he said. "I thought we could go into town around mid-morning. I already sent Dusty to tell Reverend Miller to expect us." "If that is still what you want." "It is," Theresa said firmly. After a simple breakfast, they prepared for the trip to town. Theresa changed into her best dress, a deep blue silk that had survived the journey relatively unscathed. She pinned up her honey-colored hair and stood before the small mirror, trying to see herself as Lucas might. She was 21 years old, neither a beauty nor plain, with gray eyes that her mother had always said were her best feature. Would Lucas be disappointed when he really looked at her in daylight? But when she came out to the wagon, Lucas's face showed only quiet admiration. "You look very fine," he said simply, and offered his hand to help her up. The ride to town was companionable. Lucas pointed out more landmarks, and Theresa found herself relaxing into his presence. There was something deeply calming about him, a steadiness that felt like bedrock after months of emotional chaos. Las Animas was busier in mid-morning than it had been yesterday afternoon. People moved along the wooden sidewalks, going about their business. A few heads turned as Lucas's wagon passed, and Theresa saw curiosity in their faces. News of the mail-order bride had obviously spread. Reverend Miller's house was at the edge of town, a neat white structure with a small chapel attached. The Reverend himself was a thin man with kind eyes and a warm smile. He shook both their hands and invited them inside. "I am pleased to perform this ceremony," he said. "Lucas is one of our most upstanding citizens, and I am sure you will be a wonderful addition to our community, Miss Grayson." The wedding was simple but sincere. The Reverend's wife served as one witness, and Manuel, whom Lucas had asked to come to town, served as the other. Manuel was a wiry man in his 40s with a weathered face and eyes that held both sadness and warmth. He shook Theresa's hand with solemn courtesy. "Lucas is a good man," he said in accented English. "You will be happy here, I think." The Reverend read from the Bible, spoke about the sanctity of marriage and the importance of mutual respect and love, and then led them through their vows. When Lucas slipped a simple gold band onto Theresa's finger, his hands were steady even though she could see nervousness in his eyes. "I will do my best to be a good husband to you," he said quietly, the words not part of the ceremony but clearly from his heart. "And I will do my best to be a good wife," Theresa replied, meaning it. When Reverend Miller pronounced them man and wife, Lucas hesitated, then leaned down and brushed a chaste kiss against Theresa's cheek. It was gentle and respectful, and somehow it meant more than any of the passionate kisses her former fiancé had pressed upon her. After the ceremony, they signed the register, and suddenly it was official. Theresa Grayson was now Theresa Tanner, wife of a Colorado rancher, a lifetime away from Philadelphia society. Lucas took her to the general store next, insisting she should order anything she needed to make the house more comfortable. "We have an account here," he explained. "Within reason, of course, but do not scrimp. If you need fabric for curtains or anything else, order it." The storekeeper, a portly man named Hiram Williams, greeted them warmly. "Congratulations on your marriage, Lucas, and welcome to Las Animas, Mrs. Tanner." Mrs. Tanner. The name still felt strange but not unpleasant. Theresa walked through the store taking in the supplies. It was well stocked for a frontier town, bolts of fabric, sewing notions, food staples, tools, lanterns, and countless other necessities. She selected fabric for curtains, a few kitchen items that would make cooking easier, and some staples that Lucas seemed to be running low on. As they completed their business, a woman entered the store, tall, elegant, with dark hair swept up in an elaborate style and a dress that was far too fine for a dusty frontier town. She stopped when she saw Lucas, and something flashed across her face: displeasure, surprise. "Lucas," she said coolly, "I heard you had brought a bride from back east. How quickly you moved on." Lucas's jaw tightened. "Hello, Caroline. May I introduce my wife, Theresa? Theresa, this is Caroline Winters. Her father owns the Double W Ranch north of here." Caroline's dark eyes swept over Theresa with barely concealed disdain. "A mail-order bride. How very desperate of you, Lucas. I suppose when one cannot win a wife through proper courtship, one must resort to purchasing one." Theresa felt heat rise to her cheeks, but before she could respond, Lucas stepped forward. His voice was low and hard in a way she had not heard before. "That is enough, Caroline. Theresa is my wife and deserves your respect. What happened between us is long past and has no bearing on my marriage." Caroline laughed, a brittle sound. "What happened between us? Is that what you call it? I chose Robert over you, Lucas, because he could offer me the kind of life I deserved. You are a good man, but goodness does not pay for silk dresses and fine things. Do not pretend your heart was broken. You are simply stubborn." "I am going to say this once," Lucas said evenly. "I was foolish enough to care for you once, but that ended when you made your choice. I am happy now, married to a woman of genuine character. I wish you well, but stay away from my wife and my ranch." He took Theresa's arm and guided her out of the store, leaving Caroline standing amid the flour sacks and farm tools. Once outside, he took a deep breath. "I apologize for that," he said. "I should have warned you. Caroline and I courted briefly 3 years ago. She chose to marry Robert Winters, whose father owned more land and had more money. I thought I had put it behind me, but apparently she still feels the need to prove she made the right choice by making sure everyone else feels small." "Did you love her?" Theresa asked quietly. Lucas considered the question. "I thought I did. But looking back, I think I loved the idea of not being alone more than I loved her specifically. She wanted things I could not give her: luxury, social position, excitement. She was not interested in building a life on a ranch. She wanted a life that was already built." He looked at Theresa. "I want to be clear with you. I am offering you an honest partnership, not luxury. I cannot give you silk dresses and fancy parties, but I can give you respect, loyalty, and the chance to build something real." "If that is not enough, it is enough," Theresa interrupted. "More than enough. I have seen what the pursuit of luxury and social position does to people. It makes them cruel and empty. I would much rather have an honest life, even a hard one." Lucas smiled, that slow, transforming smile. "Then let us go home, Mrs. Tanner." The ride back to the ranch felt different now that they were married. The afternoon sun was warm, and Theresa felt a strange mixture of excitement and nervousness about the night to come. Lucas had been nothing but respectful, but they were husband and wife now, and certain expectations came with that. When they arrived at the ranch, Manuel came to take the wagon, tipping his hat to Theresa. "Welcome home, Mrs. Tanner," he said with a warm smile. Inside the house, Lucas helped Theresa put away the supplies they had purchased. Then he turned to her, and she saw that he was as nervous as she felt. "Theresa," he said carefully, "I want you to know that I have no expectations for tonight. I know this has all happened very fast, and we barely know each other. I am content to let our marriage develop naturally, at whatever pace feels right to you. There is no shame in taking time to become comfortable with each other." The kindness of it nearly made her cry. Her former fiancé had been pressing her to anticipate their wedding night long before the actual ceremony, making her feel prudish when she resisted. Lucas was offering her time and respect. "Thank you," she managed. "I confess I am rather nervous." "So am I," Lucas admitted. "I have not exactly had much experience with marriage." The honesty broke the tension, and they both laughed a little. Theresa felt the knot in her chest loosen. That night, they ate dinner together. Theresa cooked, taking pleasure in creating something better than Lucas's basic stew, and talked about their pasts. Lucas told her about growing up on the ranch, about his father's dreams of building something lasting, about his mother's strength and grace in the face of prejudice. "She taught me to read in both English and Spanish," he said. She valued education even though she herself had little formal schooling. She made this place a home, filled it with warmth even when neighbors were cold to her. Theresa told him about growing up in Philadelphia, the suffocating social expectations, the endless judgments. "Everyone was always performing," she said. "Every conversation was calculated, every action weighed for how it would be perceived. I felt like I could never just breathe, never just be myself. And then, when the scandal happened, I realized none of those people actually cared about me as a person. I was just a piece on a chessboard, and when I became a liability, they discarded me without a second thought." "That sounds like a miserable way to live," Lucas said. "It was," Theresa agreed. "This is better. Even with all the uncertainty, this is better." When bedtime came, Lucas showed Theresa to the main bedroom again, and true to his word, he took his things to the smaller room. "Good night, Theresa," he said gently. "Sleep well." "Good night, Lucas." Alone in the big bed, Theresa stared at the ceiling and thought about the strange turn her life had taken. 1 month ago, she had been a disgraced woman, facing a future as a governess or spinster dependent on her family's grudging charity. Now she was married to a man who treated her with more respect than any of Philadelphia's supposed gentlemen ever had, living on a ranch under endless western sky. She thought about Lucas, his steady kindness, the way he looked at her not with judgment but with genuine interest. She thought about Caroline's bitter words, and wondered what kind of fool would choose a man for his money over a man like Lucas. Then she thought about her former fiancé, who had believed malicious gossip over her honest word, and she sent up a prayer of gratitude that she had escaped that fate. In the morning, Theresa woke early and dressed quickly. She found Lucas already in the kitchen, looking surprised to see her up so soon. "I am used to early mornings," she said. "Let me make breakfast." She cooked eggs and bacon, made biscuits from scratch, and brewed fresh coffee. Lucas ate with evident pleasure, and when Manuel and Dusty came to the door for their morning orders, Lucas invited them in for a hot meal. Both men thanked Theresa profusely, and she felt a small glow of pride at being able to contribute to the household. After breakfast, Lucas offered to show her around the ranch properly. They walked together through the morning sunshine, Lucas pointing out different areas and explaining how things worked. The barn housed the horses they used for working cattle, plus Lucas's personal mount, a steady gelding named Copper. The cattle were grazing in pastures that stretched to the horizon. "In a few weeks, we will do a gather to check on the herd and brand the new calves," Lucas explained. "It is hard work, usually takes several days. I hire a few extra hands from town to help." "Can I help?" Theresa asked. Lucas looked surprised. "It is rough work and frankly dangerous. The cattle can be unpredictable and you would be on horseback all day." "I can ride," Theresa said. "Not expertly, but I learned as a girl. And I want to be useful, Lucas. I want to be a true partner in this ranch, not just someone who cooks and keeps house." Lucas studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. We will start getting you comfortable on a horse, and you can help with the gather if you feel ready. But you follow instructions exactly. I will not have you getting hurt." Over the following weeks, Theresa threw herself into learning ranch life. Lucas was a patient teacher, showing her how to ride properly, how to read the cattle's behavior, how to anticipate problems before they became disasters. She learned to mend fences, to recognize when a cow was about to calve, to spot signs of disease or injury in the animals. She also transformed the house. The curtains she had ordered arrived, and she spent several days sewing them to fit the windows. The fabric brightened the rooms, making them feel more welcoming. She reorganized the kitchen to be more efficient, planted a small garden behind the house for vegetables and herbs, and began the process of making the house a true home. But more than the physical changes, something was shifting between her and Lucas. The initial awkwardness faded as they spent their days working side by side. Theresa found herself watching for him, listening for his step on the porch. She noticed things about him: the way he was always gentle with the horses, his patience with Manuel's questions, his dry sense of humor that emerged once he grew comfortable. Lucas seemed to be noticing her too. She would catch him watching her as she worked in the garden or cooked dinner, and the expression on his face made her heart beat faster. It was not the calculated flattery of her former fiancé, but something deeper: respect mixed with growing affection. One evening about a month after their wedding, they sat together on the porch as had become their custom. The summer night was soft and warm, filled with cricket songs and the rustle of wind through the cottonwoods. Theresa was mending one of Lucas's shirts, and he was working on repairing a bridle. "Theresa," he said quietly, "can I tell you something?" "Of course. I know we married for practical reasons, because you needed an escape and I needed a wife, but over these weeks I have come to care for you in a way I did not expect." He set down the bridle and turned to face her. "You have made this house a home. You work harder than anyone I have ever known. You are smart and capable and kind, and I find myself thinking that I am the luckiest man in Colorado territory." Theresa set down her mending, her hands trembling slightly. "I care for you too, Lucas. At first I was just grateful for your kindness, for giving me a chance when my life had fallen apart. But now it is more than gratitude. I admire you, I trust you, and I find myself wanting this marriage to be real in every way, not just in name." Lucas reached over and took her hand. It was not the first time they had touched. He helped her on and off horses daily, They passed things to each other constantly in the course of work, but this touch was different, deliberate and tender. "I have been sleeping in that small room trying to be respectful," he said. "But I would like to share a room with my wife if she is willing." Theresa felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she met his eyes. "I am willing." That night, when they closed the door to the main bedroom together, there was nervousness but also a sense of rightness. Lucas was gentle and patient, treating her with the same care he showed in everything he did. And as they came together for the first time as husband and wife in truth, Theresa felt the last vestiges of shame and fear fall away. This was nothing like the furtive, pressured encounters her former fiancé had pushed for. This was mutual respect and growing love, two people choosing to build something together. Afterward, lying in Lucas's arms in the darkness, Theresa felt tears on her cheeks. Lucas noticed and raised himself on one elbow, concerned. "Did I hurt you?" he asked anxiously. "No," she said quickly. "No, these are happy tears. I am just thinking about how different my life is now from what I thought it would be. A few months ago I thought my life was over. Now I feel like it is just beginning." Lucas kissed her forehead. "You saved my life too," he said softly. "I did not realize how lonely I was until you arrived and filled all the empty spaces." The summer passed in a blur of hard work and growing intimacy. Theresa became increasingly confident on horseback and proved to be a natural with the cattle. During the gather, she worked alongside the men, and though the days were long and exhausting, she felt a fierce pride in being able to contribute. The hired hands from town treated her with respect, and she overheard one of them tell Lucas that he had chosen well. In September, Theresa began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited another few weeks to be sure before telling Lucas. She chose an evening when they were alone on the porch, watching the first leaves turn gold on the cottonwoods. "Lucas," she said, taking his hand, "I have something to tell you." He turned to her, immediately attentive. She guided his hand to her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby," she said. "In the spring, I think." For a moment Lucas just stared at her, then his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly but carefully. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "Theresa, that is the best news." "Are you well? Do you feel all right? Should you be riding still?" She laughed at his immediate concern. "I feel fine. A little tired sometimes, but fine. And yes, I can still ride for a while yet, though I will be more careful." Lucas pulled back to look at her, his eyes suspiciously bright. "I cannot believe it. A child. Our child." That night they talked long into the dark about names, about hopes for their child's future, about the family they were building. Lucas told her how much he wished his mother could have met her, could have known she would have grandchildren. Theresa felt a pang of sadness that her relationship with her own family was so fractured. But then, Lucas reminded her that they were creating their own family now, built on better foundations. The news of her pregnancy made Theresa even more determined to secure their future. She began keeping detailed records of ranch expenses and income, looking for ways to be more efficient. She started raising chickens for eggs and meat, which saved trips to town. She preserved vegetables from her garden for winter. Every small economy felt like building a stronger foundation for their child. News of the pregnancy spread through the small community, as such news always did. Most of the responses were positive. Women from town brought by gifts of baby clothes and advice. Reverend Miller and his wife came to offer congratulations. But one day in late October, when Theresa was in town buying supplies, she encountered Caroline Winters again. Caroline was pregnant too, quite visibly so, and she made sure Theresa noticed. "Having children already," she said with false sweetness. "How convenient. I suppose that was the point of the whole arrangement. Theresa felt anger rise in her, hot and protective. The point of my marriage was to build a life with a good man, she said evenly. The baby is a blessing, but Lucas would have been enough even without children. How touching, Caroline said. Though I wonder if you will still think ranching romantic when you are trying to care for a baby in that isolated house, miles from help. At least I have servants and a proper home. I have something better, Theresa replied. I have a husband who values me as a person, not as an ornament. Good day, Mrs. Winters. She walked away, her head high, and did not look back. When she told Lucas about the encounter later, he shook his head. Caroline is miserable, he said. Robert drinks heavily and gambles. The double W is mortgaged to the hilt from what I hear. She chose money and status, and it has brought her nothing but misery. Do not let her poison you. I will not, Theresa promised. I know what I have here, and no amount of her bitterness can touch it. Winter came to the ranch with its expected harshness. The snow piled high, and there were days when they could not leave the house. But Theresa found she did not mind. The house was warm and cozy, and being snowed in with Lucas felt like a gift rather than a burden. They read together by the fire, talked for hours, made plans for the spring and for their baby's arrival. Lucas was increasingly protective as her pregnancy progressed. He would not let her do heavy work, insisted she rest frequently, worried constantly about her health. It was endearing even when it was excessive. I am pregnant, not made of glass, she reminded him when he tried to prevent her from carrying a basket of laundry. I know, he said, taking the basket anyway. But you are carrying the most precious thing in the world to me. Let me fuss a little. How could she argue with that? The winter seemed to last forever, but finally spring arrived. The snow melted, the cottonwoods budded, and Theresa felt the baby moving more strongly with each passing day. Lucas brought in a woman from town, Mrs. Hernandez, who was known as a skilled midwife. She examined Theresa and declared everything was progressing normally. First babies often come late, she told them. So do not worry if you pass your time. The baby will come when it is ready. Theresa went into labor on a warm April evening. The contractions started gently, and at first she thought they were the false pains Mrs. Hernandez had warned about. But as the hours passed, they grew stronger and more regular. Lucas sent Manuel racing to town to fetch the midwife, then stayed by Theresa's side, holding her hand and trying to hide his terror. I am all right, she kept telling him between contractions. This is natural, Lucas. Women have been doing this since the beginning of time. That does not make it less frightening, he admitted. Mrs. Hernandez arrived as the sun was setting, took one look at Theresa and shooed Lucas out of the room. She does not need you hovering and worrying, she said firmly. Go boil water, pace the floor, do whatever men do. I will call you when there is news. The labor was long and hard. Theresa lost track of time, focused entirely on the work her body was doing. Mrs. Hernandez was a calm, steady presence, coaching her through each contraction, telling her she was strong, she was doing well, the baby was coming. Finally, as dawn light began to creep through the windows, Theresa felt an overwhelming urge to push. Mrs. Hernandez checked and nodded. This is it. When the next pain comes, you push with everything you have. Theresa pushed and pushed again, and then suddenly there was a release of pressure and a thin, angry wail filled the room. She fell back against the pillows, exhausted and trembling. A boy, Mrs. Hernandez announced, holding up the squalling infant. A big, healthy boy. She cleaned the baby quickly and expertly, then placed him in Theresa's arms. Theresa looked down at the small, red face, the tiny fists waving indignantly, and felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. This was her son. Hers and Lucas's. "Can my husband come in now?" she asked. Mrs. Hernandez opened the door and called for Lucas. He practically ran into the room, his face pale and his eyes wild until he saw Theresa sitting up in bed, holding a bundle. "A son," Theresa said, smiling through exhausted tears. "We have a son, Lucas." Lucas approached slowly, as if afraid he might break something. When he looked down at the baby, his expression was one of absolute wonder. He reached out a tentative finger and the baby grasped it with surprising strength. "He is perfect," Lucas whispered. "Theresa, he is perfect." "You are amazing. I cannot believe you did this." Over Mrs. Hernandez's protests that she should rest, Theresa insisted on sitting up to visit with Lucas. They had discussed names for months, arguing gently back and forth. Now, looking at their son, the decision seemed obvious. "I would like to name him James," Theresa said. "After your father, James Tanner." Lucas's eyes filled with tears. "My father would have been honored. James Tanner it is." Mrs. Hernandez stayed for 3 days, making sure both Theresa and the baby were thriving. By the time she left, Theresa was moving around more easily, and James was nursing well. Lucas was besotted with his son, spending hours just watching him sleep. "I never knew I could feel this way," he confessed one night as they lay in bed with James sleeping in a cradle beside them. "It is like my heart is walking around outside my body now. I would do anything to protect him, to protect you both." "I know," Theresa said softly. "I feel the same." The months that followed were a blur of sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and the strange, fierce joy of new parenthood. James was a good baby, healthy and growing fast. Lucas was a devoted father, taking his turn walking with the baby at night, changing diapers without complaint, marveling at each new milestone. As summer came again, Theresa found herself reflecting on how much had changed in just over a year. She had arrived in Las Animas covered in shame, running from a scandal that had destroyed her old life. Now she had a husband she loved deeply, a beautiful son, and a home that was truly hers. The shame that had clung to her like a shroud had been replaced by pride in what she and Lucas had built together. Pride in the family they were creating. One afternoon in July, nearly a year and a half after their wedding, they received unexpected visitors. A fancy carriage pulled into the ranch yard, completely out of place in the rough surroundings. Lucas went out to greet them, and Theresa heard voices, a man and a woman. Then Lucas appeared in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. "Theresa, you have visitors from Philadelphia. Your cousin Edward and his wife." Theresa felt her stomach drop. Edward, the cousin whose visit had sparked the scandal that destroyed her reputation. She had not spoken to him since that terrible day. What was he doing here? She handed James to Lucas and stepped outside. Edward stood by the carriage, hat in hand, looking travel-worn and anxious. Beside him was a pleasant-looking woman she did not recognize. "Theresa," Edward said, his voice breaking slightly, "thank you for seeing me. I know I have no right to ask, but I needed to speak with you." "Why?" Theresa asked, her voice cold. "You already said everything I needed to hear when you remained silent while my reputation was destroyed." "I know," Edward said miserably, "and I have regretted that silence every day since. May I explain, please?" Lucas stepped up beside Theresa, James in his arms. His presence was both supportive and protective. Theresa took strength from it. "Very well," she said. "Explain." Edward took a deep breath. "The man who started those rumors, who claimed to have seen us together in compromising circumstances, his name was Thomas Whitfield. He was the business partner of the man you were engaged to. I have spent the past year investigating, trying to understand why he targeted you. I finally found the truth." He pulled papers from his coat. "Whitfield was embezzling money from the business." You had mentioned to your fiancé that you noticed some irregularities in some papers he had shown you. Do you remember? You said something seemed wrong with the accounting. Theresa did remember. She had always been good with numbers, and she had mentioned to her fiancé that some figures did not seem to add up. He had dismissed her concerns, telling her not to worry about business matters. Whitfield realized you might discover his theft if you married into the family and saw more of the business records. So he fabricated the scandal to destroy your engagement and discredit you so thoroughly that nothing you said would be believed. Edward's voice was thick with emotion. He used me to do it. He knew I had come to you for help with my debts, which he himself had encouraged me to accumulate through gambling. He watched us meet, then twisted it into something sordid. He handed the papers to Theresa. I have proof of all of this. Whitfield has been arrested. Your former fiancé is facing his own legal troubles for benefiting from the embezzled funds. And I have statements from multiple people confirming that nothing improper ever happened between us, that the entire scandal was fabricated. Theresa stared at the papers, barely able to process what she was hearing. Why are you telling me this now? Because you deserve to know the truth. Because I should have fought for you then, and I have spent every day since regretting my cowardice. Edward's eyes filled with tears. I let you be destroyed to save myself from my own embarrassment about the debts. I will never forgive myself for that. He gestured to the woman beside him. This is my wife, Martha. We married 6 months ago, and I told her everything. She is the one who pushed me to finally do the right thing and bring you the truth, no matter how much time had passed. Martha stepped forward, her expression kind. I told Edward that if he wanted to be the man I thought he was, he needed to make amends. What happened to you was monstrous, and you deserve to have your reputation restored. Theresa looked down at the papers, then at Edward, then at Lucas standing solid beside her with their son in his arms. Slowly, she began to laugh. Everyone looked at her in confusion. I am sorry, she said, wiping tears of laughter from her eyes. It is just that you have traveled all this way to restore my reputation, but I do not need it restored. Not here. Here I have never been judged for those lies. Here I am simply Lucas's wife, James's mother. I am valued for what I do, not for what people say about me. She looked at the papers again. I do appreciate knowing the truth, Edward, and I appreciate that you finally found the courage to seek it out. But that scandal is the best thing that ever happened to me because it brought me here. If I had married that man, I would have been miserable. Instead, I found a real home with a real partner. Edward looked stunned. Lucas squeezed her shoulder, pride clear in his eyes. However, Theresa continued, I will accept these papers, because perhaps there are other young women in Philadelphia society who could benefit from knowing how easily reputations can be destroyed by cruel men with selfish motives. If making this public can protect others, then the truth has value beyond just my personal vindication. Edward nodded eagerly. I have already begun that process. The story is spreading in Philadelphia. Multiple newspapers have covered it. Your name is being cleared in society. That is good, Theresa said. Though I have no intention of ever returning to that society, but I do forgive you, Edward. You made a mistake born of fear and weakness. We all have those moments. What matters is that you are trying to make it right now. The relief on Edward's face was palpable. He and Martha stayed for a brief meal, and Theresa found herself enjoying Martha's company. The other woman was sensible and kind, and it was clear she genuinely loved Edward and was working to make him a better man. Before they left, Edward had one more thing to say. Your parents asked me to tell you something if I found you. They said they are sorry. They should have believed you, should have supported you. They let society dictate their actions instead of their love for their daughter. If you ever want to write to them, they would welcome it. Theresa considered this. Her parents had hurt her deeply by siding with her fiancé and society over their own daughter. But she also understood the pressure they had been under, the rigid expectations of their world. "I will think about it," she said finally. "Tell them I am well, I am happy, and I have a beautiful son. Tell them they have a grandchild they have never met. If they want to know him, if they want to be part of our lives, they need to accept that I am not returning to Philadelphia. This is my home now." Edward promised to relay the message, and then he and Martha departed in their fancy carriage, looking distinctly out of place against the backdrop of prairie and mountains. That evening, sitting on the porch with Lucas while James slept inside, Theresa felt a sense of completion. The shadow of Philadelphia was truly gone now. The truth was known, her name cleared. But more importantly, she realized she no longer cared about her reputation in that old world. She had built something better here. "Are you all right?" Lucas asked, studying her face. "I am more than all right," she said. "I was just thinking about how strange life is. If that scandal had never happened, I would have married the wrong man and lived a lie. Instead, I married you and found the truth. Shame brought me here, but pride keeps me here, pride in us, in what we have built." Lucas pulled her close. "Shame has no home here, only pride does," he said, echoing his words from that first day. "I told you that when you arrived, and it is even more true now. You have made this place everything I dreamed it could be." The years that followed brought their share of challenges, droughts, and harsh winters, market fluctuations that affected cattle prices, the normal struggles of ranch life. But Theresa and Lucas met each challenge as partners, supporting each other through difficult times and celebrating the good ones together. James grew into a sturdy, curious boy who loved following his father around the ranch. When he was 3 years old, Theresa gave birth to a daughter they named Anna, after Lucas's mother. 2 years after that came another son, Robert. The house that had once felt too empty was now filled with the chaos and joy of children. Theresa became a respected member of the Las Animas community. She helped organize a small school in town, taught several women to read, and became known for her kindness and practical wisdom. The story of her vindication had spread, and people admired how she had overcome injustice with grace. Caroline Winters's life followed a sadder trajectory. Her husband's drinking and gambling worsened, and eventually the W Ranch was foreclosed. The last Theresa heard, Caroline had returned to her family back east, divorced and bitter. Theresa felt pity rather than satisfaction. She understood now how easily life could go wrong when you built it on the wrong foundations. Theresa did eventually reconcile with her parents, though the relationship remained distant. They visited once when James was 5, and while they were polite and seemed genuinely impressed with the life she had built, the old closeness never returned. But her children had grandparents who sent gifts and letters, and that was enough. Manuel remained with the ranch for many years, becoming almost like family. He taught James to ride and rope, and the boy adored him. Dusty lived out his final years in comfort in the bunkhouse, regaling the children with exaggerated stories of the old frontier days. As the years passed, the ranch prospered under Lucas and Theresa's joint management. They expanded the herd, improved the breeding stock, and built a reputation for quality cattle. Theresa's careful record-keeping and financial management ensured they weathered the bad years and made the most of the good ones. But beyond the material success, what mattered most was the life they built together. Every evening, no matter how hard the day had been, they would find time to sit together and talk. Every challenge they faced together. The marriage that had begun as a practical arrangement between strangers became a deep, abiding love that sustained them both. On their 20th anniversary, Lucas took Theresa back to the spot where they had first seen the ranch together, cresting that rise on their way from town. The children were with Manuel for the day, giving them rare time alone. "You remember that day?" Lucas asked, his arm around her waist as they looked out over the land. His hair was gray at the temples now, and lines creased his face, but his eyes were the same steady pine green that had first captured her heart. "I remember being terrified," Theresa admitted. She was 39 now, her honey-colored hair touched with silver, her body marked by years of hard work and childbearing. But she had never felt more beautiful than when Lucas looked at her the way he was looking at her now. "I thought my life was over. I thought I would spend the rest of my days living down a shame I did not earn." "Instead, you built something better than you ever imagined," Lucas said softly. "We built it," Theresa corrected. "Together. You took a chance on a woman covered in shame and gave her pride instead. You gave me a home, a family, a life worth living. Every day I am grateful I answered your advertisement, grateful for your kindness and patience and love." Lucas turned to face her fully. "I am the one who should be grateful. You transformed my life, Theresa. You made this ranch a home, gave me children, made me happier than I ever thought possible. That day you stepped off the stagecoach was the luckiest day of my life." They stood together, looking out over the land they had worked so hard to build, the home they had created through years of shared effort and love. In the distance, they could see the house with its cheerful curtains, the barn and corrals, the cattle grazing peacefully. Smoke rose from the bunkhouse chimney where Manuel was probably making dinner for the children. "I would not change a single thing," Theresa said. "Not the scandal, not the fear, not the uncertainty. It all led me here to you, to this life. Shame brought me west, but love gave me a reason to stay." Lucas kissed her then, gentle and deep. A kiss that held 20 years of shared joys and sorrows, 3 children, countless sunrises and sunsets, and a love that had grown stronger with each passing year. When they finally returned to the house as the sun was setting, the children ran out to greet them. James now, a young man of 18 who was taking on more responsibility for the ranch. Anna, a thoughtful girl of 15 who had her father's steady nature. And Robert, a boisterous 13-year-old who kept everyone laughing with his antics. That night, with the whole family gathered around the dinner table, Theresa looked at each beloved face and felt profound contentment. This was what mattered. Not reputation or social standing, not what people in Philadelphia might say or think. This, the laughter of her children, the warmth of her husband's smile, the solid walls of the home they had built together. She had come to Colorado territory as a mail-order bride, fleeing scandal and shame. She had been rescued not by a prince or a fairy tale hero, but by a lonely rancher who offered her respect and a chance to start fresh. And from that practical beginning, they had built something extraordinary, a marriage based on mutual support and growing love, a family full of joy and laughter, a life that was hard but deeply satisfying. Years later, when Theresa was an old woman watching her grandchildren play in the same yard where her own children had played, she would sometimes think about that young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach with her heart full of fear and shame. She would wish she could go back and tell that woman not to be afraid, that everything would work out better than she could possibly imagine. But then she would see Lucas, old now but still steady, still kind, still the man who had said those transformative words on their first meeting. "Shame has no home here, only pride does." And she would know that young woman had found her way just fine, had discovered that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually doorways to the best ones, that endings can be beginnings, and that love real, honest, everyday love is worth more than all the reputation and social standing in the world. The ranch continued to thrive under James's management after Lucas and Theresa grew too old for the hard physical work. Anna married a schoolteacher from town and raised her children just a few miles away. Robert became a veterinarian and brought his knowledge back to the ranch, helping improve the health of their livestock. Lucas and Theresa spent their final years together in the house they had made a home, surrounded by children and grandchildren, secure in the knowledge that they had built something lasting. When Lucas died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 76, Theresa held his hand and whispered her gratitude for all the years they had shared. She lived another 3 years, spending her days telling stories to her grandchildren about the old days, about how she had come west on a stagecoach, how their grandfather had been the kindest man who ever lived, how love and respect built better foundations than wealth or status ever could. When Theresa finally passed away quietly one spring morning, surrounded by family, her last thoughts were of that first evening on the ranch, sitting on the porch with Lucas under endless stars, feeling for the first time in months that she might actually be safe, that she might actually belong somewhere. She was buried beside Lucas on a small rise overlooking the ranch, and her gravestone reads simply, "Theresa Tanner, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother, she left shame behind and found pride." And beneath it, at the family's insistence, "Shame has no home here, only pride does." The ranch remained in the family for generations, and the story of Lucas and Theresa became family legend, the tale of the mail-order bride who came west covered in shame and found love instead, and the lonely cowboy who recognized that reputation meant nothing compared to character. It was a story about second chances, about building a life on honest foundations, about the transformative power of respect and kindness. And in a small way, it was a story that embodied the best of what the West represented, a place where the past did not have to define you, where hard work and integrity mattered more than social status, where two strangers could build something lasting and true. Las Animas, Colorado Territory might have been just a small town in an endless landscape, but for Theresa and Lucas, it had been the place where their real lives began, where shame gave way to pride, and where love proved to be the strongest foundation of all.